All right. Well, welcome, Angela, to the podcast. We are so excited to have you.
Thank you guys. I'm so thrilled to be here. Truly. This is going to be a fun conversation.
It is. So, as we do this with each episode, we kick off first with could you share a little bit about yourself, both personally and professionally, so our listeners can know a little bit more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the short version, food scientist meets commercial sales leader, right? I've been in the food and beverage industry for 20 years now, trained as a food scientist and um, commercialized bakery products. I niched down into bakery science and commercialized bakery products for a good part of 5, 6 years. Did an MBA, transitioned into B2B ingredient sales and really never looked back.
All
And
right.
I've loved it. That was always part of the intention, right? Of getting a sound technical acumen. And then how do I continuously use that technical expertise on the commercial side of the business where a lot of the decisions are being made and drive value and solutions and problem solving across the value chain. So, I describe myself a bit today as a industry strategist. I really love to decode things, figure out how things are built, how they work, how people rise in their careers. But a lot of what fuels me today, beyond my two boys, I guess that's the other personal thing to know about me. I have
Yeah.
two little rambunctious boys, a 3 and a 2 year old. I live in Minneapolis with my husband, and um, but I'm very passionate about helping women accelerate their careers in the food and beverage industry and building the rooms and relationships and visibility to help them do so.
Hey, Katie and I always joke that like sales and supply chain are like spirit animals. You need like they gotta like work together and like when it's
We
magical when
are.
it happens. So yeah, I love to hear your background. Angel, you're at dinner with friends and they are not in food and so how do you describe like, hey, this is what I do to people that are kind of outside the industry?
Yeah, the best, so many people hear food and beverage, right? And they think, oh, I go to a restaurant and eat food. And so I just put it really simply as far as, the ingredients that go into the products that you buy in the grocery store. I represent those ingredients, right? I help bring those ingredients to market and work with some of the largest brands and companies in the industry um, to to help them commercialize those F&B products. And I describe that as like part one of my career. The other part of it is I'm a founder of Females in Food, and I help women. I'm the founder of a leadership development and talent platform that accelerates the careers of women in the food and beverage industry, ultimately to close the gap that exists in senior leadership. That's a long-winded way of
That's okay.
It's so
it's a
cool,
mouthful.
though.
It's a mouthful over a dinner party for sure.
Okay, so we're going to start at the beginning of your journey, and then we are definitely going to get into females and food. You have shared, you have this philosophy, which I think is so beautiful. It says, there are those who follow the recipe and those who create their own. And I love that too, because you started out as a scientist, and I think some people think that's very regimented,
Yeah.
where, following that formula can be very critical for what you're trying to achieve. When did you realize though, like was there a moment or was there this story where you're like, I can't keep following the recipe. It's time for me to like go my own way and maybe go off script.
Yeah, exactly. I really love this metaphor analogy for a few different reasons. Um yeah, I started very technical in my career path, but found it to be a very prescribed career track.
Mm,
And I think that goes along with a bit of like the roots of it in academia and knowledge and like people telling you that, you kind of beyond proving yourself, you've advanced your knowledge or expertise and then you're ready for that next technical role, right? So it just keeps building. But ultimately, that lends itself to somebody else telling you when you're ready, when
mm,
you're supposed to be in leadership. And that's that's a hard thing to unlearn once you've been taught that for a number of years, right? And so I've always had this inside voice inside me saying, like, I'm ready to spread my wings. I can make so much more impact. I can do this. I've always been one to like raise my hand, take on that extra project, volunteer for things, but also kind of like challenge the status quo of like, why exactly are we doing that? And that's probably the scientist in me as well, like always challenging the theory of something. But as that created some tension within, my career track of, "Hey, I know I'm ready for more," and people telling me, "No, you need to wait." Just that was really my point of, you know, starting to advocate for myself, speaking out, choosing my,
Mm.
kind of choosing your own career path.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Not to say that it was always like it wasn't always comfortable, right? And I think
Mhm.
people would have looked on the outside of, "Hey, you're rising quick. It looks like momentum." It felt like success to me, but it was definitely moments of tremendous stretch and tremendous growth. Um, but that's also where I learned the most, had the most
Yeah.
impact,
Yeah.
really challenged myself, and so, yeah, the following the recipe might be great in food science, but as it relates to your career, I'm just such a huge advocate of owning your own career story and making those choices and knowing that, like, not one single choice is going to make or break everything in your life, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna
Yeah.
be a step forward in your journey.
I do think it can feel early in career like it is like, oh my gosh, you don't wanna make the wrong decision, and I can really speak for myself. I think it takes a lot of time. It took me a lot of time to get confident enough to not just do what everybody said,
Yeah,
'cause
Yeah.
it just was like, well, they seem to know they're where I wanna be.
exactly.
I
They
should
did
just
it this
listen to
way.
them.
Yeah, I gotta do it that way too, and, I think there's so many different ways to get there, but even in the last 5 years, I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but so much has changed in the industry and how what's expected of us in our careers, our visibility, or how you know, we say we're trying to connect with the consumer in the most authentic way, but as employees, like, being your authentic self, I think that definition has changed so much in the career in the workplace over the
Mhm.
past 5
Yeah.
years.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
so
Alright,
that's been the other thing I've been, like, dabbling in of, like, going down rabbit holes mentally of, like, what is going on?
so Angela, you were a food scientist. Now, and then into sales. And so you worked on both sides. And so in many companies, we've all had this, so R&D creates this wonderful product and the supply chain comes in, and we with our negative Nancy are like, we can't find the ingredients, it's too difficult to make it. And then sales is like, "We're gonna sell 300% of the forecast on this." And then so having worn both those hats, what what are conversations or one conversation you believe that R&D, our operations, sales should be having at the start of projects, but rarely do?
Yeah. I love this question because the tension is real. Um, and I've experienced it on both sides, but I was lucky early in my career when I was starting with Cargill. I was part of a very entrepreneurial group out on the West Coast, and we were very turnkey. But what was cool is like we were expected to move very fast. And I know in smaller organizations, they can do this, but the example that it set was really great in that we all operations, supply chain, marketing, graphics, R&D, we all came to the table anytime a project kicked off and talked about it together, right? Innovation is not a relay race. It's meant to be a round table. And I truly think when the stakeholders are brought in early, you can avoid so much conflict in the end because you're right, you get to the end and you're like, "This is impossible," and ultimately, like, when we think about what drives innovation in the industry, we shouldn't be starting that conversation with, "Can we do it?" It's, "Should we do it? Does the market want it?" Like, how do we keep our
Mhm.
compass going towards what consumers want and need and not just what can we create that fits within this box, which I don't think that conversation has to be mute, but because a lot of organizations, you have current assets, but if you are a bit more expansive and have everybody at the table from the beginning, I think there's just so much more opportunity for our industry. And so, yes, the tension is very real when the stakeholders are not a part of the conversation from the beginning, and I think inviting supply chain in early, if anybody in R&D is listening, please do it. Save they'll save you so much heartburn down the road, and a lot
Um,
of time redeveloping in the lab.
yeah, no, I loved how you called it's innovation should be a roundtable, not a relay, because a relay
Yeah,
can feel transactional, and I'm just like
exactly.
handing it off to you now. Um, And it's not a relay because it's just so much more intertwined, you know?
I love that. That's a
Yeah,
great
I do.
yeah.
Like, it's not a relay, it's a round table. That's
What
great.
do you think, Angela, stops this from happening every time? Like, when we know, because we all know it kind of what should happen, what do you think is a barrier?
Think we get siloed into our business functions,
Mm.
right? And we report up through different chains, and we all have different priorities and different KPIs, um and I also think we're all just so busy as well. Like,
Mhm,
we're so
mhm.
focused on executing, um and I have fallen guilty to this too. I was thinking back to some different parts of my career of, like, where I needed to stop and be like, "You know what? I've given" as a salesperson, I've given, like, all my other people, we work very cross-functionally. I'm like, "Okay, I've given my product line managers love. I've been giving my R&D people some love." When I say love, like, you come into a new role and just getting to know them, the projects, what's important, right? Like, those conversations, I'm like, okay, there's some tension here existing with supply chain. It's time that, like, we really build a solid relationship. Like, I need to take that time to really invest in my peers and stakeholders in supply chain, because when you start feeling that tension, right, it's typically just a communication breakdown and not time. We start sending emails, they're flying back and forth.
Oh my gosh, yes.
What's the demand forecast? And we just kind of take the human out of it. Like, how are
Mm.
you doing and why do you need this information from me? Let's have a conversation about it. Um, and we can move things forward so quickly. But I I think that's a very simple answer to a very complicated global supply chain and an industry that is changing very rapidly. But I do think as we head into 2026 and I see this theme in so many other parts of my life as well, I think the human element is going to become so much more important and than ever before. I think as we see AI coming into the picture, like, we have to remember that we're all human at the end of the day, and, like, we have to interact with each other.
So true across so many things.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Uh,
one of the skill sets I wanted to ask you a little bit about, because I thought this was so cool. So you transitioned into sales, but it was for very technical ingredients. I don't know if I'm going to say this right or not. It was things like phytosterols and pre-gelatinized corn flours. It's things that like consumers eat every day, but very technical terms. So you have to have this deep technical knowledge, but I imagine you're also trying to explain really complex technical things to, to maybe either it could be consumers, customers, any approach that you have, because I think sometimes we sit in supply chain and we have really complex challenges, and sometimes we're trying to, if you for a better word, like sell it in, like, hey, we think we can solve it this way. Do you, and we get a lot of questions around communication and how do you do that and translate, any framework or approach you had being in that role where you had this very technical thing that you're selling, but you need to explain it in a way that's easy to understand?
yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and, something it took me a while to learn, because coming out of a technical role, you do want to over explain it, and you just don't have nobody has the attention span um or the ability to digest that to get to the point, which is what's the impact. And
Mm,
so, um, my advice in this and where I have found success is one main message, three reasons why it matters, and enough detail to build the confidence for the leadership to make the decision or the client to make the decision, but not to confuse them, right? And so, um, you could also take the approach of, like, big picture, small words. That's um, that's just a funny joke, but in general, this goes beyond, I've represented from commodity, you're right, nutraceuticals to commodities, flavors, eggs, and from a sales perspective, a lot of times I have very um, new people on the other side of the table who don't understand this, or who don't understand the ingredient to the level of detail that I might, right? And that could be an
mhm.
R&D person, that could be a procurement individual, that could be supply chain. So, um, it's really important to think about what is the main message you're trying to get across, and, like, three supporting reasons, and then to build the confidence. that formula has not only worked from a sales perspective, but even a lot of the coaching that I've done for women and talking about their careers,
Yeah.
right? Because so many times we wanna talk about all of our responsibilities. I'm like, "What impact did you have? What was the result of that?"
Mm,
And we get stuck on all the details of what we did versus what's the result and what's the impact and what do we need to do to move the decision forward. So I think it's good advice regardless if you're selling a very technical ingredient, trying to sell a technical solution, upward
Mhm.
into leadership or just even advocating for yourself.
I love that main message. 3
3 re
reasons why somebody should care about it,
big
and
picture,
sum up the
small work.
detail. Yeah, big picture, small words.
Keeping that one. All right.
I
Angela,
love
you
that.
founded Females in Food in 2019. Often, a catalyst can create a community. So, when you thought about starting it, did you feel kind of isolated as a woman in the food industry, or was it more of a gap that you saw? And then, secondly, how did you turn that feeling into a true like digital talent marketplace rather than just like a casual networking group? Because I think we can always get together and do something casual, but you've created really um, a focus on talent and I think really get people getting something out of it, more and nothing wrong with casual networking, but just excited to hear about how you've really transformed, females in food.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the first part of that is like, how did it come to be? What was the catalyst that drove me to start this? And, I'd spent a number of years at Cargill building that internal network, spending a lot of time doing that. You leave that and you go, especially get to a remote role, and you realize very quickly, you're like, I feel isolated. As you're building your career, you realize I've spent all these years building this internal network that now just doesn't exist for me. And so, a few themes arose for me as I went through this journey. One, our entire value chain was not talking. And so when you think across what was happening 6, 7, 10 years ago in our industry, we were, this is pre-pandemic. There was no place for corporate food service, corporate retail suppliers, CPG manufacturers, like, there was nowhere where anybody was coming together to really communicate across the entire value chain, and when we think about how interdependent we are as an industry, I thought, "How silly," right? How silly that
Yeah.
there's no way to efficiently do this. So that was one theme that I was seeing as a gap. Second, as women get busier, our networks were the first thing to go, right? Our time investing in our network, external network.
Mm.
Yeah.
It, it's at the pivotal moment in our career that, um, typically we're the most valuable, but we become the least visible.
Yeah.
We start pouring into everything else.
Such a good insight.
I know. I
Yeah,
was like,
I told you I've been going down a lot of rabbit holes recently about what's going on, and been sitting on some of these thoughts for a while, but as we rise in our careers and we take on caregiving needs, that's really like, we have so much to offer the industry, yet, we silently pull back in our visibility because we're doing the work, but we're pouring into everybody else over here, and all of a sudden we become less visible, which a lot of people see as lack of readiness. And then you also aren't taking the time to invest in your external network, so it's like, how are we supposed to advance if we're not if all these things are happening at such a critical moment, in time in our lives. And so, um, thinking about how do I give women the access to the leadership development that they need to help themselves, an efficient way to connect with women who are genuinely interested in helping them, and and then access to the entire supply chain so that we can solve problems. Success looks different to everybody, and sometimes it's just solving a problem in your day-to-day job that moves the needle, right? That solves impact and gets you acceleration. Um, so the crux of this though, because joining a community doesn't create momentum, engaging with it does. And so
Yeah.
when I created this platform, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, first of all. Like, this notion of, like, I knew at all what I was doing is probably, a little over exaggerated. But, you take one step in front of the other and you figure it out as you go, and the most important piece was I was listening to the women and listening to what they needed and then creating solutions for that. But the culture and the heartbeat of the community and what has driven it forward is the reciprocity. That you get out of it what you put into it by engaging, showing up with an intention of a give get. We're all here to succeed, but it doesn't have to exist at odds with one another. And we all have something we can offer one another. And we also are all looking for support as well and being
Yeah.
honest with ourselves and being open with that ask. We don't
Mm.
ask for it as much as we should be. And um I think when you combine those elements into a room, powerful things happen. All of a sudden people are making introductions, doors are opening, and so I and my team, we've spent a tremendous amount of time cultivating this culture within this community that continues to build on itself. And I say, the more we grow, nothing, like, if we lose this culture, n this doesn't exist. Like, this
Yeah.
only exists because the culture that we've created inside, and that's why it works. And so when people show up with that intention and reciprocity of helping one another, we see we see transformation within careers, but also transformation within businesses. And
That's so cool.
that's where we see millions of dollars of new opportunities and promotions and board seats, all of it happen. So that's exciting.
So with that, I mean, this kind of goes into our next question. Um, Females in Food has been described, it's not just like this networking group, it's like this movement or a think tank, if you will, where people can exchange ideas and help each other move forward. I like too how you said, if you don't kind of show up with the mindset that you're here to reciprocate, I think sometimes people think of networking as like, I don't know, I know people don't exchange business cards anymore, but it's 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 got to be deeper than this surface level.
Yeah.
Hello, how are you? Here's my name and title. What does that look like and feel like at these events? That does feel different for females in food.
Yeah. It's the vulnerability.
Mm,
Truthfully, that's when you're trying to get complete strangers to get to a deep level of relationship building and off that surface level, you have to very quickly get to a level of vulnerability where somebody can feel like they can connect with somebody over something real beyond a job title, location, or whatnot. And so
Mm.
at our events, um, if they're a smaller, more meetup, under 20 people, we go around the room and we make everybody say their give get. And it takes time. It does take time, but we give people that stage um, to say what it is that they can offer somebody else and what is it that they're looking to get in return, and you just get a level of vulnerability from people. Actually, the last event we did in Dallas, we changed it up a bit, and we asked people to tell us end of year, "What are you most proud of?"
mm,
And what's interesting is that very few, actually, like, 1 or 2 people only talked about work. They're not
Mm.
talking about KPIs, right? They're talking about what in their personal life were they most proud of, their son getting to that team or their spouse doing X, and so, that also was just a really beautiful moment and example of how people are building relationships on a deeper level very quickly. Um, but yeah, in our larger events, our summits, I mean, those are 200 people events, so you can't do it where everybody talks about their give get, but some other really simple ways that I encourage other organizations to think about is we send our guest list in advance to our attendees, and we encourage
That's
them to
nice.
start connecting, because I feel so often this is like guarded in our industry, and you go to a industry group conference and you have no idea who's going to be there. Like, you're sending cold emails like, "Hey, are you going to be there?" And, like, if you have an entire list, you're like, "Oh god, I didn't even know, like, I know that person already, or I don't know that person, but I wanna connect with them, and all of a sudden, people are generating conversations before the event even starts,
Yeah,
so that
yeah,
by the time they get to the event, um, they're they're building that relationship, and then we create conversation topics, at tables, talking prompts. We try to build in other bits and pieces that kinda get people to open up in those conversations more than they otherwise would, because networking is not easy.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
not, and Courtney and I talk a lot about this. It has to feel genuine, and you do feel like you have to build a connection with someone, and that comes from, I love how you said that, vulnerability and really sharing about what you're working on, what you're worried about, maybe what you're
Yeah,
excited or proud of. It's a deeper level. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Angela, your mission is to build a stronger bench of women leaders. And, I would say across the board in like sales and supply chain, we see a lot of people coming in, but then you see as we get to the C-suite that really doesn't make it through the pipeline. And so where do you feel like that leak is in the pipeline? And you talked a little bit about visibility earlier, but do you think it's opportunity and visibility, or what are some of the other factors that you've
Yeah.
observed?
I think it's absolutely both, and as I said, this is something I've been giving it a lot of thought recently, and this is also supported by the new report that just got released, I think, in the last week or 2 by McKinsey and the Lean In report around.
Mm,
It's fascinating, devastating at the same time that in the first time in their 11 years of putting out this report, they're seeing companies deprioritize the advancement of women. Like,
Mm, mhm.
they're literally setting that as a lower priority, not they don't care if they have parity. So, like, we're seeing that removed from KPIs and companies. I'm not personally like, in our partner companies, and I'm seeing people lean into it more than ever for they
yeah.
realize we need this human element, we need this network, we need this engagement, for our workforce and for the health of our company, but, um, so that's one piece of this, but also like that they talk about the ambition gap within that report, but they note that that ambition gap completely disappears when women are given the same opportunity in sponsorship as men. And so it's not a the issue's not motivation, right? It's
Mhm.
access, it's sponsors, it's being in rooms where our work is known and being a part of systems that don't penalize complexity. And so the I talked about it a little bit earlier as far as like this exact moment when women become the most valuable, they become the least visible.
Mm,
And we
mhm.
need to be making sure we're owning our work, that we're actually claiming it. I've contributed this. I made this impact, and
Mm,
that we're not just when we get really busy in life and caregiving that we forget to talk about our accomplishments.
yeah.
So yes, I think and then as we silently step back while we continue to do the work, that's where lack of readiness and the opportunities just don't get presented to women. And so it is the pipeline isn't broken. It is just leaking the exact moment women become the most valuable and least visible. And I think there's some solutions. I think there's some real tactical solutions here that can be implemented to change that.
So one of the things, and I can say I struggle with this or this thought process, and I've heard this from some of my mentees. It's like you don't know what it takes at the next level or what the personal toll is. And so then you're like, for me, I'm like, Katie and I were just having a discussion. I've been having like it's like as if conscious, I don't know, but I'm kind of like, I know how busy I am today. Like with what I have on my plate today. I'm just speaking with Jim
The
Wetzel,
exhaustion of it. Yeah.
and he talked about how he was like, he made a choice that he didn't want to move. And there's like decisions of that. And I think Katie and I talk about that too. We moved 8 or 9 times and now we're like, I'm tired. And you're just like, if that's what it takes for the next thing, I don't know, just, and I don't know, maybe men have the same mental, internal struggles, but that's one that I look like even as a VP now, I'm like, I just don't know if I can do more. Like, I am like, I'm tired. I get up at 4
Yeah.
ends, and I'm like, it's all I can do to read a little bit of my book and feel like an adult and then pass out and start
Yeah.
again. Like, and I just been thinking, like, if someone's asking me for more to get promotion, I would be like, I just don't know. I just
Yeah,
don't know if I
no,
can.
you're totally right, and that's the point that I didn't mention, like, as these accumulations happen, right, we're exhausted. We're all exhausted. Like, don't I remember the conversation with the last manager I had. She's like, "Where do you wanna be in 5 years?" I'm like, "Literally doing exactly what I'm doing today." I'm like, "Don't give me any more. Don't put anything else on my plate. I'm not interested." Like and right? But, like, that
Yeah.
and then she did, it was really funny, and then she did, but, you know, she also took some things off. She's like, she knew I could make a bigger impact, in a slightly different role, and so, you know, it's having those managers that see the best in you and create the opportunities, but also
Mhm.
understand the complexity because I was like, "I don't want to travel." So, like, what helping me looks like is by making sure like, I can remain enrolled, but, like, m mitigate how much travel I have because I got babies at home, like
Yeah.
yeah, you're right, women we're like, people are leaving the workforce because 'cause they're exhausted, and or they're not asking for that next challenge or that next opportunity
Mhm.
because, like, what else more can I take on?
The other thing I remember from I forget what season was with Leah Murphy, she talked about, like, the free labor that we do at work
Yeah.
and, like, planning all the conferences or,
I love Leah Murphy, by the way.
Yes, she's
She's
Yeah.
lovely.
fabulous.
She
But it was,
is.
like, such a concept where and I look for it now, I had to open my eyes to it, and I'm like, if the planning committee on any work thing is all women, it's like, no. Because, what to your point earlier about visibility, I had, a manager tell me one day, he's like, "If you do the top 2 things really, really good, if that 3rd thing drops, like, nobody's gonna care." Like, he's like "If you" and I do think men might prioritize better what are the top things to at least showcase and highlight of, like, what they've done, and, I don't know, I feel like we'll be very efficient and get a lot of stuff done,
Yeah,
but I don't know if it's, like,
it
the
could
most
be.
important thing, I don't know.
No, I
The
did a great experiment a few years ago, and this is, like, a very vulnerable moment for me, I can't believe I'm putting but it's many years in the past, but I did this, a company that's, yeah, very much in my past, but I did this fun experiment in my job in that I, like, didn't do any of like, I was in a sales role, I was in a key account management role, and all that internal BS of, like, eh, all the things you're supposed to do. I didn't do any of them until, like, I was yelled at, and then I did, like, 5% of it. Again, I don't recommend this, but this was a fun experiment. That proves my point here, like, spilling the tea. Um,
We love
um,
tea.
I didn't
We
do
do.
anything, and frankly, like, I maybe worked 20 hours a week in, like, focused work. Um, and I got an exceeds expectations.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, I was only prioritizing the things that moved the needle. I
Mm,
let go of everything else. And what did I gain? I gained so much more, like,
mm,
freedom. I was happier. I was doing all these things that, like, filled my
mm,
cup. And so I was, like, more engaged, happier person. I only did, like, literally I'm like I looked down, I'm like, "Is this gonna make a difference?"
mm.
In moving the needle for the company or my KPIs or the bottom line of revenue because we stack ourselves with so much administrative tasks and
Yes.
so how do you I stripped away all of that. I didn't do it. And I still got exceeds expectations um that year in my role. Not I'm not recommending people do this. Again,
She's like, "I'm not saying."
But wait, there's I follow she's like name's like Dr. Julie. Now I'm forgetting Dr. Julie's last name. I follow she has like a Reddit thing. I send it to Courtney sometimes. But she does a lot of executive coaching with like these big co-founders out in Silicon Valley and everything. And everything you're talking about, I'm like, all the bells in my head are going off. Cause what she's like, you have to ruthlessly prioritize
yeah.
or you will never make big things happen. And she always pushes and says, like, reflect and look back at how you spent the last week, the last four
Mhm,
weeks, and did that time really like the things you talked about? Like, this is what's going to move the needle. All the other stuff, it's just
Yeah.
gonna
it's like
go to the
noise.
side. Get that?
exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's
and,
just
eh, you know, it's kind of like the whole point of electrician, like, you're not paying me for the amount of time it takes to cut that wire, you're paying me to know which wire to cut. And so you get to a level of proficiency and efficiency within your career of knowing, it doesn't you may not be stretched, you know the company well enough, you know your job well enough, and I'm like, all that other noise, like, I'm not gonna prioritize it, and so it was just a good example of, like, wow, is this, like, how men feel? I'm
I
sorry,
will
but,
say,
like, but is this
yeah,
how it feels, like, where you can fill your own cup and have all this time for yourself
that's what they feel. I think
and still have success at work?
that's how they feel, I think. I also think tell you right now, so just put so when we get the nasty, like, letters, we are. I also feel like the things that go through our brain, okay, camp registration starts in this and da 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 da, and then for ski this weekend. Do I have like, I don't think their brain gets filled with at least, I don't my brain is like all the time. I'm like, what like the next thing that's coming and all the I
We
don't think
carry
that
so much.
yeah,
It's
I
like
don't think they feel that.
all the
But I
open tabs in my head, right? Like, it looks like a
yes,
computer screen, but it's like you have I was talking with a productivity coach the other week, and she's like, we say we're great multitaskers, but we're really not performing to our highest ability when we're focused on 1,900 different things.
yes.
And that was the great social example, great social career
I
example
think the thing is
that
good
I
is like
lived for a
I'm
you
year.
inspired. I'm gonna go back and look at my calendar so
I
that
know. But Katie,
next
what are you
week when I
saying? Like
start work.
whatever you don't say no to, you're saying yes to. And
That's
I do
true. Yep.
think
Yep.
the like saying no, I tried that. Remember I tried that for like a week and it was
You
so
did.
liberating.
You
And it
did.
was
You said no to
great.
everything.
Like I was
Yeah.
like, no. And then if it didn't have an agenda, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to that meeting.
Exactly.
It was very liberating. I did someone finally I got in trouble. Somebody was like, okay. I was like, no, no. And I was like, oh yeah, I need to
At least you know where the boundary's at now, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm naturally one that likes to ride that boundary and
Love it.
choose it pick your own path. Take
Yes.
this
Yeah.
for and apply it as you see fit in
Thank you
your
for
own life.
sharing though. I think it's a great experiment. All right, so we're
My
going to
pleasure.
switch over to some career advice questions.
Yeah.
You are all about real conversations that can lead to real change. So if our listeners wanted to have a real conversation tomorrow, Monday morning at work, not just small talk with it could be a mentor, a sponsor, boss. What do you think that opening line should be to have that real conversation?
Yeah. I First of all, I think people should stop asking for advice and start asking for access.
Mm,
I think we ask for way too much feedback, and this is actually what a business coach told to me. She's like, "Stop
mm,
asking for so much feedback. Like, the decision that you need to take to move forward, and, like, you're again, feedback is a gift, but I think in general, we ask for too much of it. But
too many gifts.
one line I think people could ask to, like, move the needle in in your job is, like, go to your boss, go to your manager and say, what would someone need to see from me over the next 6 to 12 months to be considered for X?" Right?
Mhm,
It signals like, your intent, it sets
mhm,
expectations, it puts your name into the hat for
Mhm.
mhm,
their mental file, and it's not like, you're setting in place a strategy,
mm.
um, and so that's one line. I probably could come up with a few more, but I think that's one way of just stating your intention and also saying that you're willing to do the work to get there, right?
I
Mhm.
Like,
like that
I
one.
understand there's gaps here, but what do I need to do? Because I want to get here.
I
And
appreciate that. It is so action oriented. Like it will lead to action. And also, I love this too. This ask for access, not
No, I
feedback,
love that. I'm
access.
using both of
Yeah.
them. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is great. Okay, this went by so fast. So this is our last question. As we talked earlier, I think you've had like such a great career and kind of like written your own path. And for those listeners that like they're like, I am where I am, I feel kind of pigeonholed. Like how do they start that process to rewriting their career and like changing their brand if they need to that, to your point, people can see them doing more. So how do you get out of that, like, if you feel
Yeah.
stuck place?
Again, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Another mental rabbit hole for me. Um, but your identity is not your job title. And I from coming from somebody who spent many years having my own identity represented by my job title, it took a
Mm,
really long time to unlearn that. Um, but eh, a place to start. And again, this isn't easy because I think when we talk about visibility, personal brand, how do you want to show up? What do you want people to know you about? And I had to ask myself this question. If we stripped away everything, we strip away your job title, we strip away your company, we strip away all your other titles, mother, caregiver, wife, dog mom, aunt owner, whatever it is, what would people know about you?
Mm.
mm,
What would you want people to know about you? And then I started thinking, what should I talk about? What should my voice represent? And that is a hard thing to get to, and I started thinking about why. Why is that so hard to get to for so many people? Not just women, but I think it's men and women. What would you want to say?
mhm,
And I think it's you when we come into our career, you start layering everybody else's voices and expectations onto you, and you start becoming very performative of you start reading the room before you speak. You
Yeah.
start, um um, you start playing into the corporate politics, and you start listening to who you should be, how you should act before you show up as your full self. And so, I think as we get further along, that true identity, that voice, those things that we're passionate about become a lower volume, and they become even harder for us to hear within ourselves. And so this has been a path that I've had to take, and spend a lot of personal time thinking about. Um, and an exercise that I think some listeners, if you want to try this, is like think back when you were 18. Like what were those passions or ideas that were pulling you out of high school and into your next step? What were you most excited about? Um, because that version of you matters,
Mm.
right? That's some of your purest moments before all this other stuff started building on you, and your career, your experience, your journey, that's important. But, like, if we start stripping back to your personal brand and what do you want people to know you for, because your job title can go away tomorrow, your company can go away tomorrow. So, like,
mhm,
and so it's one thing to say, start building your personal brand, but I think it's a harder question to say, what do you want your voice to represent and what do you wanna
mhm,
put out there? And I think I'm a millennial, I just turned 40. We came into the age of social media, like, Facebook came out when I was in college, and so we have all these people who are telling us, "Be careful what you put online. That's forever." Right? "Be careful what you say. That might impact your personal brand." Like, our personal brand is that fragile to begin with, right? And
mm,
so I it's a harder thing to get at and unlearn, 20 years of people telling you to be careful in social media or and I'm not saying that's not that there's not good advice in that advice, right? Like, I do, but when you're trying to show up authentically and build your brand and doing that with so much layered nuance in it, it's really hard to just get back to your purest version of what am I passionate about? What do I want my voice to be? And so I'd say figure out that. Do that internal work for yourself first. And I think you're going to come to some alignment with your values and what you want to stand for. And then start building your voice, making sure you're owning your first internally, right? And owning your work, owning your impact in your workplace, speaking up for the things that you really care about, that you're passionate about, and then find those platforms that you want to amplify it. And I think leadership shows up in so many other places than just the workplace.
Yeah.
And I see women underrepresent themselves so much in this. Like, they're like, "Oh, yeah, and I'm, the manager for our 2 hockey teams, and I'm doing this over here and this over here." I'm like, "We need to be owning that." Those are
huh,
massive responsibilities on we're showing up for in our lives, and or oh, I'm on a board seat of this nonprofit. That's a big deal. Like, let's talk about
Yeah.
that. And so I think that there's so much as women that we're doing that we never own, we never talk about. And I think that's
Mm,
a good place for you to start if you feel pigeonholed right now. Start doing that internal work, start owning what you are doing and put it out there to the world. Own it, talk about it, find those places. FIF, that's another reason that it exists, is to give the visibility to women in our industry. I also say podcasts like these, like, it is really hard to be discovered, right? It's really hard. People don't wait for somebody to come tap you on the shoulder to be like, "Tell me all the things that you're amazing at." Like, that doesn't happen. Like, start pitching yourself. Pitch yourself to a podcast. You look out and you wonder how people are getting these opportunities. It's not by chance. They're pitching themselves. They're putting their name in the hat. They're going and asking to speak at conferences on a topic. They're putting their own thought leadership out there, um, and that's where you start moving the needle in your personal brand.
love that advice. I will
Long
say, I can speak for me, I think, Katie, we talk about this. Doing this podcast has forced us to put ourselves out there in a way,
Yeah.
and, like,
For sure.
I feel very desensitized to a no, or, like, you do have to, like, pitch and put so much out there, and
Yeah.
we get a lot of yeses, but it is, I think, it's been a good learning and skill set to be okay with, like, everyone's not gonna wanna come on it, everyone's not gonna wanna partner with us,
Yep.
and there are
Yep.
people that do, and that's okay too, but
Yeah.
as a, like, supply chain nerd, I'm, like, pitching and, like it's like, that is not natural. It has did not felt natural at all. So I think
It's been
that's,
a good
like, a
muscle to
good.
build. Yeah.
Yeah, mhm.
You're stretching some muscles for sure, and that, and I think a lot of people will through that process, but I love the Brené Brown quote, like, eh, you know, the if you're in the arena, right, getting, if you're in the arena being brave and doing that hard thing, let's not pay attention to the people that are, throwing the rocks from the seat,
Mm,
that are never once
mm,
Yeah.
trying to get into the arena, right? And
Yep.
so,
mm.
Yep.
That's a
um,
good one.
she says it way more eloquently, and,
That's okay.
clearly
It's Brené
I
Brown.
can't yeah.
It's
I there you go. I'm not Brené, but she has some really good valid points.
you got some
She
you
does.
you got some great stuff, Angela. Do not downplay.
Yeah.
It's been so great to have you on, and, like,
Thank you
this will
guys.
not be the last interaction you have with us. This has been
I
No,
so
know, this has been
amazing.
lovely.
there's gonna
So
be
much
some
great learning.
fun things, even, would love to get some collaborations between your community
Oh my
and
god,
our
I was like,
community as well.
can
Yeah.
we keep our WhatsApp up just to, like, make sure we're staying. I was like, "We need to go to lunch," and, like, I was already, like I was like, "Worst she can say is no." I
Yeah.
mean
Let's make it happen. That's what
Yes.
I say, that let's, and, to other people, like, I'm a big
Like,
follow through. If you invite me, I'm gonna say yes, and I will show
no,
up. So,
I
I'm
think
like,
there's so
Right.
much
always
we can learn
beware of
from
what you
you.
invite me to.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I'm gonna
love
stop
it.
with that.